Today I'm going to attempt to draw an analogy between the facts of our fictional Santa Claus and the hierarchy of truth within the Catholic Church. So first off, when looking at truth, truth is not subjective. Like, true truth is what it is and it cannot change. For instance, Santa's hat is red and white. If somebody is colorblind, they might say, no, it's gray and white. But you would say, well, no, that's what you see. So it's a reality to that person. But the ultimate truth about the hat is that it is red and white. Whether or not every single person can see that, the blindness ends up causing them to not be able to see the real truth, the real reality about what's going on. So understanding that truth is not subjective is the first part of this entire talk. Secondly, Christ came to bear witness to the truth. So we have Christ. We have in paragraph 215 of the Catechism that says that God is truth itself. So God can't lie. He can't bring forward anything, and we're allowed to abandon ourselves in full trust to God because we know that he cannot tell a lie. He talks about true riches in heaven and the true bread from heaven all throughout the New Testament. The Old Testament, Psalm 119, talks about the sum of your word is truth, and every one of your righteous ordinances endures forever. So in the Catholic Church, there's this thing called the hierarchy of truth. And basically, there are four staple groups that it falls into, which is, so the first one is the Trinity, which is ultimately the central, most foundational part of the faith. So when we compare that to Santa Claus, we see, okay, he delivers all of the toys to the boys and girls on Christmas Eve. Like, that is the fundamental belief of Santa Claus. So then we have the second part, which is the person of Jesus. So he's the incarnate Word. He was born of the Virgin. He suffered, died, was buried, rose again. He was a part of God. And understanding like he was made in the beginning. So when we look at Santa Claus, we say, okay, what's the next part? Okay, he eats Christmas cookies every single time that he comes and drops off the stockings, and he weighs more than the Titanic, right? So we have this second belief about Santa that although it's not as fundamental as delivering the presents on Christmas Eve, it's still a big part of who he is, no pun intended, and ends up formulating himself into the being that he is and the belief that children hold for him. Then the third part is the Paschal Mystery, or the dignity of the human person. It's basically how we're saved. It's the sacraments. It's becoming holy. It's having morality. And so this part could be, I don't know, Santa's sleigh is driven by reindeers, and he lives in the North Pole. So after he comes from and goes to the North Pole. Again, not a fundamental, it's still a big part of who Santa is and what children believe about him. And so it's not something that wavers. It's not like, oh, is Santa from the North Pole or is he from the South Pole? No, the fact of the fictional being is that he's from the North Pole. So it's not that it's an area of question or something that's up for debate in this hierarchy of truth, but it's more so just something that in the importance of the faith, where it falls in line there. And then the fourth grouping is the church, which is the body of believers. It's Christ's mystical body. So maybe this is that all the elves make all the presents that Santa actually delivers, and Mrs. Claus takes care of him. So it's this other belief about Santa that's held, only it's just not, again, as fundamental as, like in the Catholic faith, the Trinity. It's not as fundamental as the fact of he goes around to every house and delivers presents for the stockings every Christmas Eve. So that's what the hierarchy of truth is. It's not so much that we have all these debatable topics that, like, the Trinity is the most upheld and that's the only thing that can be completely unwavering, and then as we go down the hierarchy of truth that all of a sudden it's like, well, this could be this way but it's that way. But it's just more so how fundamental is it to the faith, and like what is the central focus and what's that hierarchy. So but yeah, the hat's red. So we have to believe that Christ is who he says he was, that he came for truth, he came to be a witness to the truth, and that we have availability to that now through the church, which is in the hierarchy of truth. And we can see all of that going forward in what the highest priority is of believing in our Christian faith and continuing to grow in that. So I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I will see you again next Sunday. Have a great Sunday.